Welcome to another program in the CSEC Circle. Today we are going to be discussing the poem Little Boy Crying by Mervyn Morris. I am Bunnell Yearwood. To my left is Faith Richards and to my right is Dexter Johnson. How many of you have ever gotten lashed? And what was the reason for your punishment? Let's do a little discussion. Dexter, you look as though you've been lashed.
Having West Indian parents, I don't think there's a person that got away at some point without lashes. So yes, I have been lashed many times, many times.
Well, I haven't been lashed many times, but I have been lashed as well.
I think that generally girls get away with not being lashed too often. I think it's mainly the boys who get the lashing. Anyway, in the poem that we are going to discuss today, a little boy has been lashed. Now, in the Caribbean, until quite recently, lashing was a part of our culture. In fact, it's what we would call good old West Indian discipline. However, in this poem, this little boy who was spanked clearly was unaccustomed to it. And his reaction certainly would suggest that it was such a foreign thing for him that he could not understand how his father could have done it to him.
Little Boy Crying by Mervyn Morris. Your mouth contorting in brief spite and hurt, your laughter metamorphosed into howls, your frame so recently relaxed now tight with 3-year-old frustration, your bright eyes swim in tears, splashing your bare feet. You stand there angling for a moment's hint of guilt or sorrow for the quick slap struck. The ogre towers above you, that grim giant, empty of feeling, a colossal, cruel, soon victim of the tale's conclusion, dead at last. You hate him. You imagine chopping clean the tree he's scrambling down or plotting deeper pits to trap him in. You cannot understand, not yet, the hurt your easy tears can scald him with, nor guess the wavering hidden behind that mask. This fierce man longs to lift you, curb your sadness with piggyback or bullfight, anything, but dare not ruin the lessons you should learn. You must not make a plaything of the rain.
So we're going to start with looking at the title. So even though the title is quite simple, there are quite a few connotations to it. So Dexter, let's hear what you think could be a possible meaning for this title.
Well, dealing with boys being once a little boy, the first thing that came to my mind was, why is he crying? Little boy crying. Is it authentic? Is it a put on? Is it a show? Is he really in trouble? Did he do something wrong? Has he been mistreated? So the reasons behind the little boy crying in the title intrigues you to find out more about this situation itself.
Okay, Faith?
Well, I agree with what Dexter says. It gives us some suspense because you're wondering why is he crying. You already said why he's crying, because he's been slapped.
But we couldn't help but see that there were different layers of meaning in all of it. Before we actually get into the poem itself, there are 3 particular words that you will find students in this poem that may be a bit of a challenge. The first word is metamorphosed, second one angling, and the third one colossal. So I'm just going to give a brief definition of what they actually mean. So within the context of this poem, the word metamorphose would suggest to mean a drastic change. The word angling suggests manipulation, or even to some extent a kind of conniving. And the word colossal is not just simply about size, but it is about someone who is larger than life, a persona. So now let's get into the poem itself. We're going to actually look from stanza to stanza to see what exactly was this story behind the boy and his discipline by the father. So I think we're going to begin with Faith, with stanza 1.
Right. Well, we have the answer here in stanza 1 to why the boy is crying. The last line of the stanza says that he was slapped, and it was a quick slap as well. We see a contrast in how the boy was and how he felt before and how he feels now. As Renelle just said, the word metamorphose suggests a drastic change. Before, he was joyful, he was laughing, but now everything has changed. He is howling. So it's not even a soft cry, it's a howl, which is loud. He's howling. And the last 2 lines shows that he is looking for some remorse in the parent. It is almost manipulative in nature, and it is like he's saying, can I get away with this behavior? Will the parent, stop? Will they hug me if I keep on crying? So there's that subtle hint of manipulation in his behavior as well.
I agree with what you're saying, and certainly the addition of your bright eyes. The bright eyes in that first stanza would suggest that this child knows very well what he is doing and is looking for a response to it. Okay, so let's go on to the second stanza, Dexter.
The second stanza I found very intriguing in that you're seeing this mostly from the boy's point of view. So you've switched from an outside parent who's seeing the ramifications of the slap, and you're now seeing it from the boy's point of view. And as a young boy who's been disciplined by his parents and not knowing at all times what was the reason, you can't really, especially if you're a 3-year-old boy, you can't really put into words your feelings. So the emotions are the ones that comes out. And he frames it in a way that he would understand for his young age, in that of a fairy tale. He's seeing his father as that ogre or that colossus or that cyclops that would drive terror into you in the old stories of Jack and the Beanstalk or the Greek myths. And he's literally looking up at this horrifying visage, for lack of a better term, because all he can feel are the emotions, the dread, the hate. He says, you hate him, you imagine chopping clean the tree, he's scrambling down, much like Jack and the Beanstalk. The way he has to frame it into something that he can understand, I liked how Mervyn Morris put it in those terms. Also the alliteration, because it reminds you of a fairy tale. Grim giant, colossal cruel, chopping clean. Puts this stanza, frames this stanza into the mindset or the emotions of a 3-year-old boy who can't understand what he did wrong because he was just having fun, and now he feels betrayed by the person he looks up to.
And we like to refer to this time period of 2- and 3-year-olds as the troublesome 3s and the terrible 2s. So perhaps this was one of those times when he was extending to his parent the behavior that this particular time period suggests. But you're quite right, Dexter, in that children can only draw on the fairy tales that they're exposed to. And so for him, certainly the idea of the Jack and the Beanstalk, the punishment meted out to the giant was what he was thinking his father deserved at that point. But we do know that fairy tales are just that, or cartoons are just that. The characters are often flattened, and somehow in the psyche of the little people, they can fill back out and come alive once more. And so maybe that is what this child is thinking there. I don't think that he really wanted his parent to go permanently. He just wanted him to feel a little bit of the pain that he was suffering. Now we come to the final stanza. And in the final stanza, now you have the perspective of the parent once again. And to the parent's mind, the child can never understand the kind of pain, or a child can never understand the pain that a parent goes through when they have to punish them. And the parent says here, you can't guess the wavering hidden behind the mask. And the mask clearly is the stern mask that the parent has to put on just to ensure that the child understands this is a lesson. And I couldn't help but think of a time many years ago when my son was at primary school. And the teacher in charge of the class was charging us parents with the understanding that we need to make sure our children obey us, because when they don't obey us, some incidents could happen that you don't want. Like you calling back a child and they're running across the road, and because they're accustomed to not following what you said, then they may be struck by a car. And so we could see here where this parent is curbing the desire to hug that child in that final stanza. He says, this fierce man longs to lift you, curb your sadness with piggybacks or bullfights, roughhousing with the child. But he can't, simply because there is a lesson that the child needs to learn. And so we get to the final stanza, if you want to call it a stanza. It's just basically a single line. Let's talk about why there's just that single line. Why does it stand out?
I think he purposely puts it away from the rest. Two reasons to me that it seems to be like this. In other words, parents cannot be both parents and friends when something happens. You have to stand apart from. So and this is the directive he has given as a parent. You must not make a plaything of the rain. I remember many times my own father telling me, do as I say. Why? Because I said so. There is no room for discussion, because as a parent, you have to hopefully rear a child in such a way that they will know how to comply for their own benefit. Now, he might want to coddle the child and be all loving, but in this instance, you must not make a plaything of the rain, is set apart to frame the entirety of the poem. This is what's supposed to happen, therefore you have to do it.
I think that final line, as you would say, is very intentional. I think Mervyn Morris wanted to make a point. We've seen that the other stanzas are 7 lines, 6 lines, 6 lines, and then this last one is just one single line. And I believe that one single line was there to reinforce, just as you said, Dexter, the point that it really is about training a child the way that you want the child to go. Okay, we are going to go into looking at the themes that are the theme that is being suggested in this poem, and we're going to look at which other poems that you're studying as students that could possibly go with this one. So where does this poem fit into the groupings?
I think we can couple this with My Parents. In both poems, the parents are well-intentioned. In My Parents, the parents try to keep the child away from boys who would influence him negatively. So they too are disciplining their child and wanting him to keep away. And similarly, in Little Boy Crying, the father is using the corporal punishment as a means of discipline.
I saw it being very reminiscent, because the theme is parent and child relationships, right? And a lot of the time, children don't see what the parents have to go through or sacrifice for them. So I saw it being, or I could liken it to the woman speaks to the man who has employed her son. In both poems, the parents have sacrificed for the child. In one, the child is still in the situation, not knowing what he did wrong. But in the woman, speaks to the man who has employed her son, you can see a greater distance has gone on between the time of her sacrificing and where he's at now. But I think the overall message is that a lot of the time, children do not see the sacrifices that parents, and in a lot of cases, adults, do for them or give up for them. And so parent relationships with their children.
Indeed, what I would say, in addition to what you said, Dexter, is that when we look at the poem, The Woman Speaks to the Man Who's Employed Her Son, it's almost like a worst case scenario where the son in that particular poem has turned to a life of crime. And that is certainly not something that his mother would have wanted him to have ended up being involved in. And so, to me, if you were going to compare these two poems, you'd have to look certainly at the fact that if a child does not learn that particular lesson, that this is what they could end up. So there is a contrast between the two in that respect. Okay, finally, we're going to look at the idea of the tone in this poem. There are different viewpoints. There's a viewpoint of the child, there's a viewpoint of the parent given in this poem. And the viewpoints are lending themselves to certain feelings that I think I'm going to allow Dexter and Faith to expand on.
Well, I saw, especially in the first two stanzas, compassion and empathy, because a lot of us have been in that stage as a young person, and you get in trouble, but you don't know why, and all you can do is express it. The voice, who I think is some other parent or other adult figure looking in, can see that the boy was having fun, can understand how that feels for a child, can understand also how the boy might be angry for something. He doesn't understand why he got into trouble, but he also knows, as an adult, why it happened. The boy cannot comprehend it now, so he's empathetic to the plights of both, or he or she are empathetic to both the plights of the father and the little boy. So that takes a lot of compassion.
And then you have the son, who is just 3 years old. So all he feels now would be anger and a sense of betrayal too.
And I think ultimately that there is a sense of frustration that comes through from both parties. Child is frustrated that his father spanked him, and the father is frustrated that he has to spank him. So that also comes through. And then finally, when we look at this poem, there is clearly no rhyme scheme, and you know what we call that, students. It is free verse. What is the effect of this free verse, you may ask? The poet is able, through the use of free verse, to highlight the varying voices throughout this poem. And as a result, we can relate certainly to both the parent and the child in this context. So we are at end in our discussion of this poem, Little Boy Crying. Certainly it has been interesting discussing this one aspect of Caribbean discipline that is very quickly going to become very extinct, given the fact that we have so many agencies now against corporal punishment, against lashes. There is nothing wrong with good old West Indian discipline. And I think that this perhaps is the message which Mervyn Morris would want us to come away with. Thank you.